Hello. Let's see. Can you be heard? Can I be heard?
Hey,
Hey, I hear
you
you.
did
Hey,
it.
sorry about that. I did a run through with you're my first recording for this podcast.
Oh,
I
okay.
did do a run through with my wife this morning, and I thought we handled all the bugaboos, but apparently we did not. So sorry about
There's
that.
always something.
Always something. Live and learn. How are you?
I'm Smurftastic.
Good. Good. I'm going to talk effusively about your legendary status in our industry
Oh, you're too kind.
during the audio essay because I want to maximize the time that I have with you here. I want to talk with you a little bit about what you can recall and enjoyed and possibly didn't like about working on Dracula, and then I want to hear a little bit about what you're working on now. Uh,
Sure.
so Dracula, that book has always been really interesting to me and was destined to be the first subject of this exploration because I was a huge Mike Mignola fan in college and a big Francis Ford Coppola fan and a big Dracula fan. So all of these things coming together were going to be amazing to me. And true story, my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, who became my ex-wife, who is now my friend, won the crimson foil version of the book
Oh, great.
and would never give it to me.
Oh, sad.
She doesn't want to get. She's like, "It's mine. It's mine." I'm like, You didn't even want it. It doesn't matter. It's mine. I want it. It's mine." Which is her perfect right. Um, love, I love the movie. I love the book. Could you tell us a little bit about how? Well, I'm finding out that your company at the time was Tops was doing a lot of movie adaptations in general. So how did that come to be?
Not really. You know, they had just started Topps Comics as a part of the Topps Company, which is famous for Bazooka Bubble Gum, trading cards, sports and non-sports trading cards,
Right.
ring pops, on and on. It was their vice president of new product development, a wonderful guy named Ira Friedman, who was looking into other possibilities to expand the company. They hadn't been doing comics, and they had, as one of their creative directors, a guy named Len Brown, who was a huge comics fan. At one time, he was Roy Thomas's roommate in their
Right.
early days in New York. He worked for Wally Wood, and Wally Wood
Wow.
named Dynamo his secret identity. It's Leonard Brown, after good old Lenny at Topps. And he's a huge comics fan. And when I think they may have even hired a consultant. In this case, it was Mike Friedrich, to find what would be possible compatible businesses that Topps could enter into. And of course, comics was his suggestion. And Ira had noticed also that they've been doing, because he was heading up also the non-sports trading cards, the entertainment cards, they call them.
Right.
And so they would be getting these licenses to a lot of properties that comic book companies would also get the license to do comics on. And he thought, well, the cards and the comics, a lot of them are sold in the same stores. So why couldn't Topps be able to do both? And his particular concept was that these comics could be bagged with cards.
Right. Oh
So
yeah.
it
Of
would be
course.
both. So I believe probably in the normal course of things, Dracula would have been the next trading card series Ira would have been putting together. So naturally, that's the one he figured, well, let's see if we could do comic books based on it. And even before I got there, like they were planning this stuff. And so, as much as I love to take credit for everything, I have to give credit where it's due. So Len Brown, I think when Ira, who's not necessarily a huge comics fan, compared to, say, Len Brown, would ask for his advice and input. And he thought, based on Mike's work on Gotham by Gaslight, that Batman series,
Elseworlds, yeah,
that Mike would be a perfect guy to do Francis Ford's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Makes perfect sense.
And he was completely right about that. Len also having that connection with Roy Thomas, Roy who loves to do adaptations. What was happy to work on it. Roy will, as quite often said, his favorite collaborators are dead authors, but
they can't complain.
In this case, although Bram Stoker was dead or undead, there was people alive working on the movie. And to just back up on some of those, Mike Mignola, like you, Dennis, was a big Dracula fan. And he was hoping that one day he'd get to do a fairly faithful adaptation of Dracula. And he figured with the way things are, this particular comic would be the closest he could get, far from faithful, but an interesting approach anyway.
Right.
Roy actually had started and then eventually completed a faithful adaptation of Dracula with artist Dick Giordano.
Right.
So this was a different thing, and he was adapting, I believe, the script for the movie was by Jim Hart, and he was as very cooperative in helping make this adaptation. And Francis himself, his connection early on was when he was young, he was a camp counselor. And one of the stories he'd loved to read to the kids around the campfire was Bram Stoker's Dracula. So his goal was to, try to do an old style, movie. And, he himself has told us that I think he was happier with how the comic book came out than he was with the final film, explaining everyone he would talk to out in Hollywood. His concern was most Hollywood movies look alike. And so if he talked to the costume person or the set decker, the cinematographer, all the way down the line, he was explaining he had this concept to make this as a low-tech, sort of no CGI, all the effects in the camera. And like have it feel like it was made maybe 100 years ago or something. And and everyone he spoke to, they said, "Oh, Francis," because that's Hollywood. "Oh, we get it. We understand what you're saying. We'll do exactly that." And as Francis lamented, everyone proceeded to do exactly what they would do in any other big budget Hollywood film, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's hard to break out of those habits when you're in a particular system. So it got to the point where I was hired by Topsby, the editor-in-chief. I think again, Roy Thomas, one of the guys who hired me originally at Marvel Comics in 1972, had heard, I had left Marvel in '92, and he suggested to Len and Ira that they consider me as their editor of their comics group, and they hired me, and this was the first project which sort of fell into my lap. And again, as I said, as much as I like to take credit for stuff, so much was underway already, that mostly what I had to do was just try to stay out of the way. But it was really exciting. Roy was, happy to be involved with it. I think Mike treated the Roy's script as a guide. I think he,
as we are wont to do,
as he was deciding his own pacing. what would work best, which was fine. One of the things for comic book adaptations, and it varies from project to project, depending on how many, what kind of rights the publisher is able to obtain, was that Mike had to do some likenesses, some sample likenesses of a lot of the main characters, because those actors had approval rights in their contracts.
Right.
So, Mike is excellent. He did great jobs on everyone, and everyone was, excited. Oh, what a fun thing! I'm going to be in a comic book, except for Winona Ryder. And I think, ironically, it was because at the time she was dating some guy who had a tattoo that said Winona Forever on him, and he was advising her, Mr. Johnny Depp, that if you're going to be a successful, serious actress, you got to watch all this merchandising stuff. This is coming from the future, Jack Sparrow.
Sure.
Like Mr. We can't be involved with merchandising. And so she was very difficult, but Mike was able to, do sketches that she ultimately approved of. And if you look in the adaptation, you'll find probably a little less of her than you would in the movie. We tried to
that'll show her.
Well, not so much that, but
I kid, of course,
just to avoid the
hassle.
Well, it could hold the whole thing up. And this a lot of these movie adaptations, even though this was a serialized one, you want to, for sales purposes, take advantage of the movie studio spending millions and millions of dollars promoting the film.
Right, free advertising for you.
Comes out before anyone knows whether it's good or not. Perhaps the classic example of that goes back to Roy again, when Star Wars, Marvel's adaptation, also serialized, came out months before the movie did. And very few people remember that. And it's almost as if in a weird way, Star Wars was the first Marvel movie. Because
that's certainly one way to look at it. Yeah.
Well, there was an audience that had been reading the Marvel comic, and been hearing about it, and they were thrilled to see it. Anyway, with Dracula, we wanted to get it out as early as we could, and to take advantage of that. And so we didn't want any of those crazy holdups. The other interesting factor about Dracula was typical for Coppola. He was, struggling. I mean, this is a movie based on a classic. It's been made into movies before, et cetera, et cetera. Leave it to Francis to be struggling for the ending. It has there's endings. Don't worry. But he throws himself completely into his filmmaking. He's a true artist, and he was interestingly very involved with the creation of the comic.
How did that work exactly? Was it just phone calls, faxes? How did that logistically?
Yeah, mostly, it was in the pre-Zoom age, where it was mostly phone calls and faxes, and us dealing with his office out at I think there was still Zoetrope Studios back then, and I think his son, one of his son, who was was an assistant director or something on the movie, was also very much involved, and more, a knowledgeable comics fan. And in a weird way, and I wasn't kidding, I think Francis was, perhaps a little bit, and let me once again, yeah, Jim Hart was also involved looking at everything. I think he was probably more satisfied with how the comic was coming along, even though at that stage the movie wasn't complete. So we were adapting something, from Hart's screenplay, but that didn't necessarily mean that's what the movie would be. So
when you were adapting it, just to your point earlier, did you have the ending, or was that still in flux? Did you know that it was
a complete script
Mhm.
by Hart, and Roy had that, and Roy based his script on that. But Francis, once he's, the script's done first, and then they start shooting, he's someone who, what if we did this and what if
Right,
we did that? Another comics aspect to it, for example, is Jim Steranko,
right, right.
legendary comics artist, uh, was asked to do designs for the picture, which Steranko often mentions. But and he's published those,
Yeah, they're
and
terrific.
yeah, but I'll ask you, they don't look anything like them.
I would have to, having done some conceptual art in the film industry and TV industry, I don't know what the situation specifically there was. I know my situation, anytime I did anything, it was always with the idea of, we're going to have you do a bunch of stuff, and then we'll pick and choose what, if anything, we like out of that. We might have you do 10 and say, pick one and go, now do 10 iterations of this one. And again, whatever you're making really is just kind of fodder for us to pick through. So I don't ascribe that necessarily to because the illustrations were beautiful, but
Yes, I
and he also
agree.
did stuff for Raiders of the Lost Ark too, which is also incredible.
Well,
Um,
that seemed to work its way into the
oh
movie.
yeah,
So yeah, whereas this was like, I don't, I'm sure, uh, I'm guessing that Coppola probably respected what Steranko did,
I'm sure.
but just wanted to go in a different direction, as they say out in Hollywood. And but Steranko wound up with a rather impressive credit on the film, and Mike Mignola, who actually did something that was used in the film, had a little footnote credit. I could see by your
Yeah,
curious expression.
that surprises me. What was it specifically?
Well, let me back up. And what had
Please.
happened was, uh, it's a wonderful story if you haven't heard it before. But as I said, Francis was, working on the movie, and he was like perhaps second guessing himself and trying to figure out the best way to do it. So, and since he was enjoying the comics adaptation and seemed to really like what Mike was doing, he thought, well, why don't I invite Mike in and get some of
Oh, no,
his
I have not
feedback?
heard this story. No.
Oh, yes, yes. Can you? So imagine this. So Mike was sort of like dumbstruck by this, and uh, you know, in a rare moment of Mike asking me for advice, called me, and it didn't know how to react. And we're both assuming this is going to be a screening with maybe 20 of the studio employees and all that, and maybe a little Q&A at the end, and
A courtesy.
whatever. And who knows? But my thing with my advice was based on these Hollywood people and how Francis is very much not like that.
Hmm.
I said, if he's asking you to be there, it's entirely because he respects your work. He sees what a great job you're doing here. So Mike, if you know him, is a man with intelligent opinions, and I told him, don't hold back.
Hmm.
Don't be beholden to him. Don't feel you have to like yes them and all that. If they ask for your opinion, give it to them. And he sort of like agreed. So he goes to the screening, and like he called me like maybe the next day or something, because was kind of unbelievable to him. There were only 3 people at the screening. One was Francis, one was Mike, and the other was George Lucas.
Wow.
So, and he's asking them for their opinions. So it's almost like George and Mike are being cast in the consigliere. No, what is it? Like with Francis being, Brando and
Right.
The Godfather, letting his counsel sort of debate it. And, there's Mike, who's, as far as I know, hadn't made any movies yet. Debating with George Lucas, and and Francis listening in, and who knows how much Francis took from that, or who he listened to, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, but just what a surreal experience that is. Mike was like, I'm arguing with George Lucas about how to make a movie, and I think the specific thing that Mike did that's definitely in the movie is he designed Dracula's castle that's used in the
cool.
film. That's very much a Mignola looking castle,
Oh,
et cetera, et cetera. And he did get a far less substantial credit on the movie than Mr. Steranko did, but I think Jim probably had a better agent. And
hooray for Hollywood.
anyhow,
that's a great story.
Yeah. Well, it was great, but we were able to do it, and Mike was very heavily involved every step of the way. I have to give him a lot of credit. He I don't know who chose the inker, but Mike's style was actually in the process of evolving at that point.
Yes.
Where he had those little zigzaggy feathering technique, which was not very common in comics. And I think when Nyberg got pencils at first, he just assumed that was an indication of where to put the feathering. And I think Mike was able to have a conversation with him, meet in person, very friendly.
Of course,
saying,
of course.
Oh,
Just
no,
clarification.
yeah, let me show you what I'm actually trying to go for here. I really do want those little, zigzaggy lines and all that. And, and after one conversation, John perfectly, knew what Mike was looking for and was happy to oblige. I think it was Mike also who chose the colorist. Refresh my memory. It was the I
want to say it was Chiarella, but I don't think
yes,
it was.
Is.
Oh, was it? Okay,
definitely was.
I pulled it out.
Yeah, he's an incredibly talented
who
artist
also did
himself.
an amazing job coloring Mike when Mike did adapted a short Ray Bradbury story for Byron Price, and there was just a quick aside. There was 2 panels where there was a window, and the window was just supposed to change slightly enough to let you know something's going on. And Chiarella, it was really just him. He just chose these 2 very close but distinctly different colors to just give you that sense of, oh, something's happening here. And I'm like, this guy, he really knows what he's doing.
Well, he's also an incredibly talented painter. And I think some of the trading cards that were included, I think for sure there was one of a portrait of Anthony Hopkins, who was Jonathan Harker in the movie.
I believe I remember that, yes.
Yeah, I mean, he's just an incredibly talented guy, true artist on his own. And when I first saw his coloring, you have to remember I was coming off of 20 years at Marvel, and this was something completely different. It was like at Marvel, it's all about making it as exciting looking as possible, lots of bright colors, having the figures pop and all that.
Everything has to pop. That's all I ever heard.
Exactly. And Mike was of course, like everything he does, uses tremendous amount of black, which of course is ideally suited for Dracula, and what he and Mark with the coloring would do is on certain pages they would almost be monochromatic, except maybe the red would be what would pop out, the blood, et cetera, et cetera. It's a tremendous amount of thought went into this on just about every level. We didn't have any problems other than what I mentioned with Winona, as far as approvals were concerned. Nothing had to be changed, nothing had to be rewritten. It was a very good process. There was one actor who's I think gotten tremendously better over the years, but what's his name? Keanu. He's in it, right?
Yes.
And he's another one who probably appears less in the adaptation than he does in the movie. But I would joke at the time, and if he's listening,
sure,
you're much better now. But his acting, I thought, was much better in the comic than in the movie. Mike knew how
to. Had a good actor, how to direct him. Had a good acting coach.
Well, Francis was also, it was, I think, going back to him remembering doing this as a campfire story. I think he very much wanted this movie to appeal to young people, and therefore, he made it a point to have a very interesting, mostly young cast. I mean, Anthony Hopkins is, and a few others are the exceptions, but it was like so interesting in so many ways. And one thing I have to add, because this was sort of the debut of Topps Comics, publisher Ira Friedman personally was sort of handling the publicity for the comic, and he was phenomenal. I don't think have ever worked with anyone who worked so hard and was so successful at promoting a particular comic. It was kind of weird to put that much energy and work into something that ultimately was just 4 issues. But he was into making sure horror magazines knew about it, getting promotion, every possible place he
That's
could.
Terrific.
And so when that came out, what a way to make a debut as a new comics company where everyone knows, the comic you're publishing, and to put it in, and it sold very well, and to put it into context, Topps, how can I put this, over the years has had a reputation as a company of, shall we say, being somewhat frugal, even though they are a very large and successful business. So when they were first planning to do a comics company, they were sort of unaware that, like, off on the side, Image was planning to come along. And so Topps was, basing all its budgeting and ideas on being competitive with Marvel and DC. They had a good idea what Marvel and DC paid. So they were going into it thinking, this will be great. We'll be able to, pay top rates like the big boys. And sort of like by the time they were coming out, the whole business had changed overnight.
Yeah.
And now, the rates that Marvel and DC were paying was nothing. You were hearing stories, you probably recall, so-and-so is getting 1,000 a page just a pencil. And it was crazy. And to put it in that context, this book had to be a labor of love for Mike, because he had to be getting those kind of offers as well. And but he had that kind of desire that he wanted to do this Dracula project. And when he and the other creators were very much involved in every step of it, my thing was just to accommodate them as best I could, and realize how lucky I was.
That's wonderful. We're just about running out of time. You've given me so much. This is so wonderful. I really appreciate it. What a wonderful first interview.
Hey, look who's here.
Oh my God, that's great. we do get in the podcast, we get into the costume design. And I had a book of just the costume design at the time. It blew me away. Incredible.
And that's not all.
I love that design. I guess that's full werewolf, right? I guess technically.
Yes,
right?
yes, yep. Yeah. Look at that.
I love it.
The right before the interview, I was getting these ready, and I've had this, I guess, since '92, whatever. And if I suddenly do a little camera magic, it looks like everything's okay. But when I was cleaning it, I broke his sword. It's all your fault, Dennis.
Sorry. Let's do it. We have other TOPS projects we want to talk about in the future. So if you have time in the future, let's do this again.
Sure thing. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Take care. Have a great rest of the weekend.
I'll try my best. You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.